Welcome to the Brainz Magazine podcast, a podcast with in-depth interviews and conversations with world-class entrepreneurs, expert coaches, industry leaders, and international celebrities. Get exclusive insight into the world of business, mindset, leadership, and lifestyle with your host, Mark Sefton.
I want to welcome you to the next episode of the Brainz Magazine podcast. And today we have Pam August. Pam is the president at Connecting Potential. And Pam, it is right that your surname is in fact the month of August, right?
It is. And I've actually spent my whole life saying Pam August like the month. And no, I wasn't born in August. Although I was born in May. Having said that, when I was born, my father had a really funny idea that they would name me June, July, August. Thankfully, that one did not make the cut.
I'm surprised May didn't get a look in.
I know, it wasn't quite in enough proximity, I think.
Isn't that hilarious? Have you ever looked at like the meaning of your surname? Like, do you have like what do they have? Like some of the names they have like I can't think what it's called, like a guard of honor sort of thing.
Yeah, I did at one point, and I don't think it really struck me as particularly meaningful, so I just let it go.
So good, so funny.
Yeah.
I want to dive in today, like with you, because I always find that when I have this opportunity to sit down with somebody like yourself, lots of experience, lots of knowledge, doing some great things, and especially when it's in areas of personal fascination and curiosity to me, I always think we might as well, let's get straight into the nitty gritty.
Well, and I'm curious, what's personally fascinating to you about what I do?
Well, I think, the word connecting and connection and community and potential, they're like words that just really resonate, with me. And
Yeah.
I mean, I'm fascinated by human behavior anyway. And I think that a lot of people that listen to podcasts are obviously listening for a reason. It's a choice, isn't it, to listen?
Yeah.
And so I feel like there's a lot there that I kind of sometimes it's actually people's interpretation and understanding and an expression of what, say, that like the word potential means. It may mean something to me, and it may mean something different to you, and therefore the learning can be in the actual difference of definition rather than. So for me, that's kind of that's why I'm personally kind of like fascinated.
Okay, well let's start with there, because the name Connecting Potential for the work that I do in the world is very intentional. And it actually came, I was doing my master's degree. I was doing a master's degree in leadership through an amazing university here in Canada, Royal Roads University. And my capstone project was it was actually framed around the potential of connection. And so what I did for my capstone is I took people from different fields that were somewhat related. So I have a very eclectic background. I'm an educator, I was a nutritionist, I was a fitness teacher, I'm a yogi, I'm a neuro coach, I'm a team coach, I taught in post-secondary, all these different things. And I worked with people that were kind of like me, where they had a lot of different backgrounds that we intersected. So I brought this group together, and we had communications professionals, we had lifestyle educators, we had mindfulness teachers, mentorship coaches, leaders in business. And what we looked for was what was the potential there for the connection between us. So that was where it first started. And then after I was finished my degree, actually very soon after I finished my degree, all of a sudden, it was one of those, like many things happened to me, it popped into my brain. There's the potential of connection, and there's also connecting potential. And I realized that really what I've been doing my whole life is helping people connect or bring together the capacity to develop or become potential. And as soon as that landed for me, that was it. And then the other part of that is then when I got a little bit deeper into it and worked with my coach around getting really clear on what is it that I bring to the world, I realized that this thing called potential lives simultaneously in 3 dimensions. Probably more, quite honestly. I would say more, but for the work I do primarily with organizations, this is the context. And it lives within us as individuals. It lives between us in our relationships and teams. And it lives around us in this thing called culture. And those were the 3 dimensions that over my career, I've spent a lot of time working and learning in. And then the other thing that popped in that became so apparent is that because those dimensions are all connected, when you influence any one of them, you actually influence every one of them.
Mm.
And so that really has become what I would call the rigid minimal structure. Rigid enough to give foundation and focus, minimal enough to have flexibility and flow for the work that I do in the world, the work that I do with others. And one more thing about potential is I noticed that we often talk about it like it's something that's out there, where we're striving for our potential, where we're reaching our potential. And then you also hear, potential called, there's the book Hidden Potential, it's hidden, right? And so what stood out to me is that the potential's already there. It's actually just waiting to be connected.
Mm.
And so I was very intentional, again, about that verb. As a post-secondary, I was a college instructor earlier in my career, and then I worked in faculty development, teaching subject matter expert how to teach and how to facilitate learning more accurately. And I became known as the verb queen. I'm just all over the right verbs because we are, as human beings, we are designed to act first, feel second, think last. And verbs matter.
I like that. Something you said about I just thought it was a beautiful way of kind of really encapsulating what the word potential is. And when you said it's the capacity and development to become,
Yeah.
I think that's beautiful. It's interesting with potential because whenever I think of potential, I always think about the capacity to grow into, the capacity to reach, the capacity to explore. What turns potential into ability? Like when it goes from this has the opportunity to become, and then how does it actually go from the opportunity to become to actually being?
Being, such a great question. So I think, that I've written a book that is called Potential, How to Connect What's Already There for Exponential Impact. And what I actually teach, and my book's coming out in the world on May 7th. And what I actually teach in the book, at the core of the book, is the practice just to do that thing. Right? And the practice, not surprisingly, has 3 parts because 3 is a really magic number. And when I start to get curious about something, I go to the Google and do my so-called research. And 3 is the smallest unit that forms a pattern that we can remember. So you think of the power of 3. The brain loves 3s and likes 4s. It can handle 7 plus or minus 2. But this rhythm of 3 is really powerful. And so the practice that I teach to do just what you said, which is to turn potential into reality in the moment, has 3 parts: intend, notice, and move. And so this practice, and when I wrote the book, I wasn't even as clear as I am now on how this practice is actually the thing that creates the dynamic for which potential gets connected moment by moment. Because when we intend, we draw, there's that saying, energy follows intention, right? We draw our energy forward. And I teach in the book as well to the reader, and I teach in the work that I do that, there's an operating system, which thankfully we don't need an app for. And it's each of us and our capacity to act, feel, and think. And when we're connected as an operating system, we have an experience that is more energetic, easeful, and effective. When we disconnect, which is so often the state of the world we are in and our state in it, our experience is more of strain, swirl, or stuck.
Mm.
And so coming back to this notion of intend, what intend does is it orients our operating system to where we want to go. And it actually happens, neurologically, it happens, brings us to the prefrontal cortex, which is the place of choice and higher thinking and higher action. And then the second part of that practice that's so important is the practice of notice. Because while we can travel through time in our minds by remembering and imagining, or sometimes ruminating and worrying, right? Like that power can be used for useful purpose and not useful purpose. Is the only place our body can move from is now. And so noticing now is so critical, because as much as our intention is enticing, the only place we can take the next step is from where we are, even if we don't like it. And even if it makes us uncomfortable, it's so critical we notice it, because it's already happening. And until we notice it, we can't be at choice. And so that's notice is the second part. And then the third part is move. And move can be, with a background in yoga, and I teach a practice called Brain Gym, which is movement for brain wiring. I really bring an embodied approach to all that I do, even when working with corporations and executives, because we all show up to work in bodies anyway. Nobody's brain rolls in the room. We show up as an embodied system. So move could be, what's the smallest action you will take to move closer to your intention or your potential? And I use a lot of physical practice, like the breath, because we're always doing it.
I love how clear you are. Like, you are very clear in the way that you work and operate, and how this actually plays out in everyday life. And I love the clarity that you bring, because it brings trust, and it also just brings a sense of really knowing that you know what you're on about. How are you bringing out the potential in others, Pam? Like, how are you going about that?
Well, and thank you for that feedback. That actually means a lot, especially as I'm moving into this journey of authorship, where it really is only the words that are conveying the message, which has been really very evocative and stressful for me. So thank you. I would say, how do I do it is, so when I work with, I work as a coach, a one-to-one coach, a leadership and executive coach. And I'm trained in a methodology called neuroleadership, which is coaching with the brain and mind. And I bring in all these embodied practices. So I frame, when I work with my clients, I'm always having them repeat the practice of, what is it that you intend in X situation? What do you notice now? What's the thing we need to do now together? What's the thing you need to do after our call? What's your move, right? When I work with groups and teams, I actually specialize in a form of coaching called, it's a bit of a mouthful, organizational relationship system coaching. So it is a coaching methodology that recognizes, while each of us are parts of a relationship system, we are not the system. The system is that thing that exists between us. And the best example I could use is the chemistry you see on a sporting team and the chemistry you don't see in another team, right? Where the team of not the best players will beat the team with individual superstars because of that dynamic that exists between them, the potential between them, quite honestly. And so what I find there, again, I use the same methodology of intend, notice, and move. And what I notice, I would say I notice this with individuals. I notice it even more in teams and organizations, is what teams and organizations want to do is set their intention and then go. They want to skip the middle part, which is the noticing. And it's often, I think, why we don't get the traction on things that we want to get traction on, because we're not starting from a conscious place and a place of choice of where we are now. Right. And so as a coach, when I'm working with teams, I spend a lot of my time noticing and naming, saying, hey, I just noticed here right now that the room stopped breathing. I just noticed right now it feels crunchy in here. Or when I notice a shift, I build that capacity in the teams I work with. And I'll say, okay, everyone, you felt the shift. And they'll say, yeah. And I'll say, what did you notice changed? And I find, and I've learned, that really once we build that muscle of noticing, it's then we can take our powerful next step. Right? So again, I do that with teams. And then honestly, with organizational cultures, I do the same thing as well. We get clear on, always a culture, organization will come with me with a specific problem or challenge that we unpack. And it'll always be, again, so what is your intention in this? Who are you when you are at your best? What are the stories that others will tell about you? How has blank, blank, blank changed because you exist in the world? How does it feel when you're at your best? Questions like that. And then we do deep noticing. And often in this case, I work with a number of really great vendors in the space that systemically can get underneath what's going on in bigger systems. And I often do it just working with the people that make the system themselves. And then we design what's called the culture roadmap. What are the steps we're going to take, noticing along the way?
Love it. Self-awareness is so critical, isn't it? To be able to maximize, I think, the work that we can do individually, and also open ourselves up for somebody like yourself to come along and help shape and evolve both the individual and the organization in its own development.
Yeah, because there's that saying, where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. I also add in the whole is different than the sum of its parts. There's something different that happens in the dynamic between us and around us than can be attributed just to the parts. And that's one of the roles I play, is helping the systems see that.
Love that.
And it's interesting when you talk about self-awareness, Mark. I am a lifelong learner. I'm a little bit of an obsessive learner, and I'm actually taking a program right now, Neuroscience of Change for coaches. And we hear this word presence a lot, right? You need to show up with presence. And so presence, in the context that I've now reframed it from this learning that I've done, is that presence is simultaneously attuned knowing and awareness. So it's awareness when we can have awareness of self and awareness of context and tune into those simultaneously. That's when we can be most powerful, both as a part and on the whole.
I love that. Presence, awareness, and knowing. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, and simultaneously attuned. That's the kind of the kicker, right? Because we really can only focus on one thing at a time. And so often our focus is only on self. And so it's that ability to toggle perspective that's so powerful.
How important is it for organizational development in the workplace? Like, is this something that you see as crucial, like the continual development within the workplace, to make sure that people are kind of developing and businesses are developing in order to stay relevant and kind of be conscious?
Yeah, I mean, if as a practitioner in the space, if I said no, I think that would be a career limiting move. I love your question, because I've been a practitioner in higher education, and then I worked within I've spent most of my careers working within organizations. I actually was the director of culture activation for one of Canada's 2 airlines, and one of the best known corporate cultures in Canada. And so now the last 5 years that I now partner with organizations, I've also come to know is that when so often what we do is we say, we need to fix this, so we need a program. We need to fix this, so we need a new strategy, or we need a new initiative, or we need this. And we often will say, oh, what's Google doing? What's Disney doing? What's Amazon doing? What's WestJet doing? And the reality is there's really no best practice in any of this work, because best practice implies past practice. and human systems are unpredictable and emergent.
Mm.
And so what I'm noticing, and now through the writing of the book have been able to articulate more, is that when we pay attention to the dynamics and we build in practices that work with the dynamic, that's what helps us move forward.
Mm.
You know, because the goal of culture, I always say, is culture is really, well, first of all, culture needs to be in service of strategy. It's not, you know, picnics, potlucks, and parties. And although all of those things can be enactments of culture, but the goal of any organizational culture, any family culture, any relationship culture, any human, is to move forward the best of who you are while developing into the best of who you need to be. And so what helps that happen is this continual dynamic that I've codified as intend, notice, and move. And when we can get really clear on who we are at our best, at our core, and have that be the thing that moves us forward, then we can layer on these other things. Right? But so often, you know, there's like the flavor of the month or the program of this or the book we're going to read. If it's not connected to something that is continuing in core, it won't stick.
Yeah.
At least not as powerfully as it could.
What do you feel has been your greatest learning, Pam, when it comes to your own development? Is there something that really stands out? Obviously, you're talking about intend, notice, and move. Like, what's been the greatest example and story of that in your life?
Well, I mean, there's been a lot. I would say, well, my brain just keeps coming back to this one, so I'll go here. I don't know if it's the biggest, but it's a big one. 17 years ago, I almost died. And I became very ill with a digestive illness, and I lost 40 pounds in 40 days. And I didn't have 40 pounds to lose. When I came out of hospital, because I ended up having to be treated in hospital where I almost died, I was 85 pounds.
Wow.
And I ended up with a diagnosis of Crohn's disease. And so thankfully, I live a very well life with Crohn's. I'm very, very grateful for that. But it almost took my life. And two things happened. One was I ended up in the hospital on Christmas Eve.
Oof.
And I'd been being treated by my doctor. Nobody could figure out what was wrong, but I developed a secondary infection. So our boys were, my husband and I have two boys. Our boys were little then, got presents under the tree, made sure I left the door open for Santa, and went to the hospital thinking I'd come home with an antibiotic, and I didn't come home for over a week. And so I was laying on a gurney, and I'd had melanoma, skin cancer, 2 years before that. And so the doctor was convinced that cancer had spread. And I was laying on a gurney Christmas morning away from my family, desperately ill. And I became very aware of what I wasn't aware of, which wasn't, you know, what's happening in my career, what's the bank balance, what's this, what's that. I became really aware that what mattered in life were relationships. And what mattered in life is how we live them. And so, you know, I was off work after that for 6 months. And that was where I really, there's a book called Let Your Life Speak by an education activist called Parker Palmer. And he talks about, he quotes another thought leader, philosopher, Frank Buchner, around, you know, our vocation is when our gladness, what makes us glad, meets a world's deep need. And what I became very clear of, what makes me glad, is creating learning and relationship. And that's actually the vehicle in which I move in the world to help people connect their potential. I'm always learning. They're always learning. We're always learning. And so it was always there, but it became really clear through that period of really significant illness.
I'm so glad I asked that question, because
I am too.
I loved your answer. And here's another feather to put in your cap, right? You're a fantastic storyteller.
Oh, well,
really
Thank you.
articulate. I'm really enjoying, Pam, like just the fact that you're like I was there with you, like when you're talking about like the gurney and stuff, it's like I can feel that, and I love the fact that it made you reflect on the most important and most meaningful, which is relationships. But you went a little bit further and said like how we live in them, like
Yes.
you're adding another depth and another layer, and that's the thing that I'm really noticing with you when you are sharing, which I really enjoy. It's the fact you add a little extra that, and people kind of go so far, but I love that you go
Mhm.
just that little bit further.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for that, Mark. And great noticing. No.
I
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
enjoying this. I know that
I am
we've only got
too.
too much time left, but I've got a couple more questions for you that
Okay.
I kind of
Mhm.
really want to understand and draw from you. Obviously you're in learning and development. You are both a student and a teacher through your own exploration, reflection, embracing like moments like the one that you had, and that becoming very much the steer and the voice in which you then bring attention to others. But how do we go deeper in our own learning and development, right? You said you, at the very beginning, you said that you
Mhm.
are like a lover of learning,
Mhm.
you are curious, you explore, and I'm the same. Like, and God forbid that that appetite is ever quenched or fulfilled, because I love as well, like you, to learn. But how do we go deeper in our own learning and development?
Mm. Gosh, I mean, there's so many ways, and that's one of the wonderful things I think of the world that we live in is all you have to type in is a search, and there's so many. This isn't the right word, but there's so many nuggets and there's so many elements and contents and all of those things. I actually think it starts though with the mindset
Mm.
that is the mindset. I joke that I always say that I don't get out of bed in the morning unless I think I'm going to learn something new. And the great news is there's always an opportunity to learn something new. And so my most, I would say the question that, because we're running out of, like, we're out of time here. I have a long history as well around mental health and struggling with my mental health. I talk about it in my book. And the thing that moved me through it all was this learning mindset and the question of always asking, what am I learning through this?
Mm.
What am I learning through this difficulty or challenge? What am I learning from this conversation that just horribly failed? What am I learning through this podcast that I'm listening to? Right? And our two boys are 22 and 24, and they're well on their way for lifelong learning. Their whole lives, whenever they'd have an issue, I would say, "Boys, what are you learning through this?" And they'd be like, "Nothing, nothing." And then they would always say, "Well, actually, this." And now I'm really happy to say, many repetitions later, they're built with this learning mindset,
Mm.
right? So I think it's, if I were to share one thing,
Mm.
it's the question,
Mm.
what might I learn from this?
Mm.
And what am I learning from this?
Mm. I love that. I mean, you already talked about reframe and frame, and
Yeah.
these are these are like just the exact essence for me in terms of how I'm going about like this opportunity called life and
Yeah.
navigating through. And yeah, it's amazing. Now we have a lot of people that are creating content, that are educators, that are coaches, that are teachers, especially in the Brainz community. Now,
Mhm.
information is what someone else provides. Insight is what we generate for ourselves. As you, I know you've said this.
Yeah.
How do we become more insightful? Because there seems to be loads of coaches, loads of educators and teachers,
Mhm.
but like just how I'm identifying with you, you go a little bit further than a lot of people do. How do we go further in our insights so that we become much more helpful at unlocking and helping people go further in their understanding and in the way they're showing up?
Yeah, I mean, so through the lens of folks who are people in this work and content creators, and I've worked over the last, because I've had my own business for 5 years and I worked with a great business coach and I've gotten lots of great advice. At the end of the day, what resonates is who I am, who you are, and who others are. And if I think of the people that I most learn from, it's the people that show up as them. Right? I actually, just one second, I'm going to step away from my computer. I have this card by my desk. It's an Oscar Wilde quote, and it says, "Be yourself, everyone else is taken." In a world that is constantly telling us we need to be different than who we are, what resonates with others is when we show up as us. So I would say, like, show up as you, And Mark, picking up on what you just, what you've shared with me in this call is, what is your story and what's your learning from your story? Right? Is, I think, is really powerful. And then the other one, the other one too is three's a magic number, man. We know that, but there's having three parts, but there's thinking about what is it you want to convey and what's the rhythm or the dynamic of three. How do those three come into something that people can practice? Yeah. I used to be years and years ago, I was a competitive bodybuilder and I was a pro natural. Like I did 10 competitions, then I got really sick, not from bodybuilding, but then I became a yogi. Now I'm more back into strength conditioning. And the reality is it's like anything. We're all looking for something. We're all looking to be something. And the only way that happens is when we do the reps. You could have the best workout plan in the world, the best trainer, the best studio, the best workout wear. If you do not do the reps, you do not build new muscles. And what's true in the body is true in our mental capacities, our mental potential, our emotional potential, our relational potential, right? It's like, do the work.
So good. Whenever I think of insight, I always think of the more that we are able to see inside ourselves, the more that other people will be able to see, like, in us and also in them, because we will reflect back that which we have a greater consciousness of what is within, and it all comes back to self-leadership. It all comes back from that gurney that you were lying on, of that introspection of you seeing you within you, and kind of holding yourself accountable to what is it that my life really represents, and then making that adjustment that then makes an adjustment for other people. And then by you kind of being more conscious, it actually causes other people to wake up and pay attention.
Yeah, I love how you captured that. And I also noticing just, how you're doing this, like you're actually getting into your body. Because the other thing I've just learned, not learned, but I'm able to frame is sustainable change is two things. It's experiential and it's embodied. Conceptual awareness is another important awareness. But if we don't experience it and if we don't embody it, because we are born in a body, the change, it just becomes an interesting idea, right? And so it is that, that insight is that moment of, oh, and then what comes from that is, what do you do, right? Like insight takes us here, action takes us back into our body. And I've never actually articulated it that way before. And that came from what you shared with me. So thank you.
Amazing. Well, it's all about that connection, isn't it? And that building out that
potential between us, the potential between us.
Exactly. And I think how I say that is literally, we live in a world of information overload, but what we need is revelation, which is pretty much what you said. It's taking the knowing and the knowledge and then applying it so you actually see it actually physically embody and show up. So applying that which and seeing it is really what we really need and crave. We need revelation and not so much information.
Yeah. And revelation, what's so wonderful about that, and we should write a book together, I think. What's so wonderful about that is revelation also implies it's already there, because what we're doing is we're revealing something.
Exactly.
It's already there. We so often look beyond and outside.
Yes.
It's already there.
Yes.
In every moment. So
good, Pam. Pam, how do people find out more about you? Where do they go? What's the best place for them to interact with you?
I would say the best place is my website, is connectingpotential.ca.
Okay.
Connectingpotential.ca. You can also find my book at all booksellers. Can I show the cover?
Of course.
Oh my gosh, here's the cover of my book.
Amazing.
Potential.
May
How
7th,
to connect what's
right?
already there for exponential impact.
Coming out on May 7th.
Yep, May 7th.
That's exciting.
Yeah. And I'm not sure when this podcast will air. If for every book that's pre-ordered, I'm part of a group of women in Canada I'm on the board with Make-A-Wish Canada. So granting wishes and potential for children with life-threatening illness. And every pre-order book, I'm donating $2 to Women for Wishes. So
amazing. Last question before we drop the mic here. So I always kind of like to give people this, but is there anything intuitively that you just feel like you want to share, that you feel like somebody needs to hear, or something that you really just feel is at the forefront of what we've been talking about, that maybe we haven't given some air to?
Yeah. Oh gosh. I would say, okay, so this is what's intuitively coming to me. I come across as a person that's very energetic and confident and clear and all the things, and all of those are true. There's also other parts of me that feel scared, that feel vulnerable, that feel like an imposter, which is why I have this card by my computer, right? Because in this world, it's always like, oh, I should be like this person or that person or this influencer or that consultant or whatever. And so I would say what I want people to know is if I resonate, it's because I'm in it with you, and everything I've learned has come from my own challenges and the doing the work and learning that comes with it. And I'm not done, right? Writing a book has evoked things in me that, boy, oh boy, I've been doing some deep inner work. And get up every morning and say, okay, how am I going to show up today? Intend, notice how I am. Oh, I'm freaking out. What am I going to do? Oh, I'm going to take 3 breaths and go for a walk. I do the work and it works.
I love it. And you are a storyteller, so it's not a coincidence that you have books to write and content to create, Pam, but it's been really good. I've really enjoyed this time that we've spent together on the Brainz magazine podcast. So thank you.
Oh, and thank you, Mark. You are a wonderful, welcoming and an insightful host.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining this episode with me, Mark Sefton. I hope you've really enjoyed it. Feel free to leave us a positive review on iTunes, and I look forward to welcoming you back to the next episode of the Brainz magazine podcast.